Hi friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and I've got a knife that this video is a little long in coming. This knife came out quite a while ago. This is the J1917 by CJRB, also known as the WERA. This is a right-hand thumb stud liner lock knife. It's actually quite nice, and I grew up left-handed, and I like this thing. I learned how to be somewhat or mostly ambidextrous. And, you know, I can even use this knife left-handed if I want to. Whoops, I didn't quite flick it that time, but I can flick it when I'm, you know, paying attention properly. Whoop. Come on, Jake, you can do this. There we go. So I can flick it with the left hand. It's not anywhere near as much fun as it is with the left hand. So there you go. AR-RPM 9 steel on this knife. It comes with G10 or carbon fiber laminate on top of G10. And with those, you get Sandvik 12C27. Well, they say it's 12C27N on the package, on the documentation. Sandvik says they make a 12C27M. They don't say anything. There's no documentation that you can actually find from the steel company that says they've even made a steel called 12C27N. Doesn't exist. Although almost no companies that I've seen so far use the M. They almost all use the letter N, and that is from China. Now, I guess the Chinese have a tough time differentiating between an N and an M. Anyhow, just under 3 inches in a blade, and like I said, it's a liner lock. Are you curious about this thing at all? Do you have one? By now, a lot of you guys probably have these, and so you'll have your opinions to share down in the comments, and please do. But those of you who don't have one of these, but perhaps are looking for a small, sort of more discreet liner lock knife at a fairly low price, the Sandvik, whoop, that opened instead of closed. The Sandvik version is pretty cheap, and this AR-RPM 9 that I have in this version is still reasonably, you know, inexpensive. So come on down to the tabletop and let's take a good close look at this thing. But just before we do, thank you to those of you who support the channel every month. I appreciate you very, very much. So let's take a look at this knife first. I've got some fingerprints on this side already, and yep, that just happens with me an awful lot. Hopefully this color's right. They say that this is, you know, olive drab green. It looks a little more brown than it does, you know, just olive drab green. It does look like it's got that green in it, but it also looks a little more brownish to me. And if the color is correct on the little LCD screen, I think it's coming through the camera as a little more brownish as well. And it was that way when I first unboxed it as well, although my hands are very oily, and so when I carry a knife and use it for a while, it darkens up. Like this side right here is darkened up quite a bit, and index finger right there for a lot of the time, and I find that my index fingers kind of gets more oily than most of my fingers. You know, it's made that spot a little bit extra oily using it in my right hand. And I pretty much exclusively use this in my right hand, and although I showed you opening it with my left hand in the intro, it's really not all that left friendly. Although, you know, people who know what they're doing with their left hands can, you know, force that thumb stud, you know, to come flying out. You see how it sticks out a little bit extra there? It's easy to get behind it, you know, and you know, flick that blade out using the left hand. Well, maybe not easy. It is certainly possible to flick the blade out. Oh, it hit my finger on the thumb stud. My middle finger was here and stopped the thumb stud, you know, right there. And so it didn't open all the way. Let me get my finger more out of the way, and then I can flick it out. So, yeah, but it's really a thumb stud for the left hand. It's not really a thumb that you're using if you're doing it left-handed. Sorry, did I say left hand? It's really for the right hand. You knew what I meant, didn't you? I hope you knew what I meant. I hope you knew what I meant. Anyhow, let's talk about the blade for a while. We've got sort of a slowly swelling blade. You know how that does on a Nessmuk knife? So it is narrower here than it is here. So it is a swelling blade, and then it's a drop point. Most people are just going to call this a drop point blade though. So it drops down, and then we've got the cutting edge and back, and then we've got a fairly flat section here. Got a sharpness choil that's just barely, just the tiniest barely bit big enough. It should be coming the whole hole should be further this way, just a tiny little bit further that way. It's not terrible, but it's not quite adequate. Anyhow, full flat grind, satin finish. Like I said, AR RPM 9, which is a decent steel. It's got a thumb stud only on the one side. See there, you got a T6 screw there and the thumb stud there. So it's just that one way. That's all you get. Could they have made it right and left? Yeah, they certainly could have quite easily, because these liners line up almost evenly on either side. There's not much of a cutaway here, just that tiny little cutaway for the thumb stud there. They could have done it on this side as well and made it left friendly. When you do disengage the knife, I sort of have to bring my thumb in like this, sideways across there. So I bring my thumb in across and then I can close the blade, and that works just fine. I do it sort of from the top, not as extreme as what I showed you here, but sort of from the top and push over. It's not super comfortable doing it that way. I wish they would have, done a little bigger cutaway there, made it a little bit easier to disengage that lock. But I was talking about the blade, wasn't I? Yeah, I'm going to bounce around a bit in this video. I am organized, but I'm feeling kind of out of it today. Got a pretty strong headache going on, but yeah, that's okay. Badging, that's what I was going to talk about, badging. On this side, the badging is really nice. It's all on the flat here on the Ricasso. It's J1917, and then below that it says AR RPM 9, and it even says China. CJRB and Artisan Cutlery don't mind putting on their blades that they're from China. They're one of the few brands that does that consistently, and I'm not super pro China or anything, but I think it's important for companies to put the country of origin on their products. I just think that's important. And they do that for these knives, and that's good. They put CJRB up here on the flat. It's too big for my opinion. For the size of the knife, that's a bit too big. I wish that was done smaller. There's not really a good place to put it unless they put it really small on the Ricasso here. But yeah, so I don't like the big badging of the CJRB on there. Anyhow, nice finish. I'm okay with the blade. The pivot area here, well, we've got some ball bearings in there. It's got fairly smooth action. I showed you that before. It shuts quite easily, opens very smoothly, and with a lot of confidence. You can hear it even when you're opening it. And we've got a stop pin right up here, and it's no blade play, side to side, up and down. It's quite good. Lockup is very nice there. It's quite early, but not too early. And I already showed you it's not that hard to disengage the thing. The blade alignment, it's a little bit off on towards the show side. Still quite far from rubbing, but yeah, that's sort of okay. And I talked about the thumb stud already too, so that's quite good. We will take it apart and show you the insides a little bit later. There's a little bit of skeletonizing there, and yet the balance point is right there. I wish the balance point was a fair bit closer to that pivot point. I would like that better, but it's not terrible. And with it being so very light, it's just a hair over 2 ounces. It's not bad at all, and I'll give you all the exact measurements later on. We've got T8 screws here, and they're button screws, but they're not recessed in. So these button screws are acceptable to me, and I like those. Over here on this side doesn't have anything. It's just the pin. And then we've got T6 over here, flush screws. And let's take a look-see. Here's my screwdriver, and they're quite decent in terms of how much play there is in those screws, and they feel like they're engaging pretty good, at least with this screwdriver. Now, this screwdriver always engages very good. These are really, really nice. This is the 467 Torx HF series. WERA calls them TX. It's a TX6, and quite nice indeed. The T8 screws, well, let's take a look at these. They're even snugger fit. Like, there's no play. I'm trying to wiggle it back and forth, and it just doesn't wiggle. And this one here, there's a little bit of wiggle there. You can see the play right there. So the screws are quite good. What do we have back here? Well, we've got these liners all the way to the back. They're just slightly exposed, and the micarta is set in just a little bit. We've got a pin back there, and then we've got this weird thing right here, and I can rotate it with, a screwdriver. And let's rotate it so that the hole points up so it's easier to see. Yep, there's a hole there, and that's for a lanyard. Most of these that I've had, more than half of them, which is most, these are drilled through, and there's been a burr on almost all of them. I've had to, break away the burr, and then on the knives that I wanted to keep, I took the time to use my Dremel, to clean it up. Otherwise, there's a sharp edge there, and if you pull some paracord through there, it's going to be fraying your paracord in no time. So these are a good idea, but the execution is just not on. They're almost always, with a bit of a burr or at least a very sharp edge around there. The pocket clip, how does it fit? Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's bring in my, pretend pocket. Well, it's from a real pair of jeans, but there you go. And it climbs over. It does have a bit of a lip pointing up right there. There's no flat on it. And this knife, it didn't become a problem. I didn't have a hot spot in the hand. But it goes in, goes to the full depth, and sits quite nicely in the pocket. Not a problem. So that's okay. Let's do the spring tension for you. Yeah, you can even hear that it's got good tension. So the pocket clip's okay. And, the pocket clip comes out, sticks out, not past the end, but pretty close. It's got good spring tension. It's not too big this way, really. Not too hot in the hand. Fairly comfortable. So that's that. Let's take the thing apart, and I'll show you how it's constructed. Just before I finish taking this apart, don't you think that the flat screw should have been on this side, on the show side, to look nice instead of having the screw head on the side of the thumb stud? Or is the thumb stud side yeah, it makes more sense for the screw head to be over here. But now you got both T8s on the same side. So there you can see those holes. Why is this not going to come apart? Oh, that was really stuck. And let's get this side apart. I prefer to use something like this, plastic in there. I don't like to put metal in there because that's going to scratch stuff up. There we go. You can just see that schmutz and stuff in that screw head. There we go. Ceramic ball bearings in these white nylon cages. It is a D-shaped pivot pin. Pretty standard construction, but pretty dirty in there. I do use my knives a fair bit, to test them before I make my video. And you can see how much dirt there is on there. Now let's wipe that off with this shop towel. Here's that piece that I dropped on the floor. So I'm going to take some close-up pictures of all these parts, but before I put it back together again, I'm going to, deburr the edges of this hole so that, if I sell this knife, or even if I decide to use a lanyard ever or whatever, that whoever gets this knife next will be able to use this without having to, fray their paracord. But the construction here is quite nice. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to put it back together again, I think, with the lanyard pin on the other side. This side's got a round hole. This side's got the, D-shaped hole. I've reassembled it now, and it was after I reassembled it that I took the pictures. See, now you have the show side of the pin on the show side of the knife, and that's how I took the still pictures of the different parts. And yeah, it looks pretty good. And I've got the alignment even better than it was from the factory, so that's nice. It's still not perfectly down the middle. I didn't spend a lot of time trying either, but it's pretty good. Now let's do all the sizes and dimensions. The weight of this knife, 58 grams, 2.05 ounces. The sharpness from the factory, it was quite variable. The average sharpness out of the 3 tests I did is 160 best. A little bit worse than average, but not bad. The cutting edge length is 70.6 millimeters, which is 2.78 inches. The blade length from tip to the closest spot on the handle scales is 73.8 millimeters, 2.9 inches, so definitely under the 3-inch rules. The thickness of the steel here at the tang of the blade, 3.28 millimeters, 0.0935, so just under 1/10 of an inch thick. The blade depth, its biggest right where my index fingers are here, 18.9 millimeters, 0.744 inches. How thin is it behind the edge? Now this is fairly consistent, although it's a little thicker closer to the tip. 0.4 millimeters, 15.5 thousandths of an inch is the average thickness at the edge just behind the sharpened bit. The grind angles, this side has an average score of 16.3 degrees, this side 18.4 degrees, started at 18.2, ended at 18.6, so that's how you got 18.4, so 0.4 degrees of change. This side started at 18.4, ended at 15.2, so 4.2 degrees of change along this side. So clearly, left-handed sharpening by this person who's sharpening is not as good as their right-handed sharpening. The handle length now, the liners are slightly exposed. That's what I measured. 94.4 millimeters, 3.91 inches. The grip area, with rounded edges, it's not perfect. It's right around 9.5 centimeters or 3 3/4 inches. And the thickness of the knife right here, right along the handle scales, 10.75 millimeters, which is 0.423 of an inch. So nice and thin. The handle depth, that's this measurement, it's widest right up here, 19.2 millimeters, 0.756 of an inch. When the knife is closed, the widest point's pretty much in the middle, 21.3 millimeters, 0.838 of an inch. And the total length of this knife is 170 millimeters, 6.69 inches. The price of this knife, well, let's really get to the point of it. The version with AR RPM 9, this pricier one, it's $53.99 American at White Mountain Knives. You save 10% with coupon code CCE, and then it is $48.59. That's about 67 Canadian. The Sandvik ones with 12C27, probably 12C27M, which is not as good as 12C27 in my opinion. And it costs $34.99. You take off 10%, that makes it $31.49, about 44 Canadian dollars for that version. I strongly suggest you don't get the carbon fiber laminate version. It's a little too slippery. The micarta here is quite comfortable, and I just can't imagine having a slipperier handle than this because it's already small. You want it to be, quite nice and grippy. Now, IntegrityKnives.com, where you can also get 10% off with coupon code CCE, has listings for 3 of these. They're totally out of stock, and their price is a little bit high anyways. Blades Canada, aka Warriors and Wonders, has got these $62.99 for this one Canadian and $43.99 for the G10 one, which means now with the Canadian dollar doing really bad, it's actually cheaper in Canada right now than it is in the States. I suggest you get the AR RPM 9. Why? I already covered it just a second ago. The grip is better because of the micarta, and the steel is quite a bit better. You're looking at $19 more money for this knife, at least from the Canadian prices. The American prices, it is $16, around $16 US more for this version. I think it's worth it. I really think it's worth it. 12C27 is pretty much at the lowest end of what I like. It's a decent steel, but there's just so many better steels out these days that I don't see a reason to go down to that level anymore. So, if this was 14C28N or AR RPM 9, the decision would be much tighter. But, I really think you're better off with the AR RPM 9, and I think you'll like the micarta better too. Overall, it's got good action, good lockup. It's a good size, good weight, comfortable in the hand, thin edge, reasonable sharpening. Wish it had better. The badging, it's a little bit big here. Yeah. It's only right-handed thumb stud. Well, that is 90% of the population, so I can see why they did that, although, I wish they would make a left-hand version or make it so that it's ambidextrous. I like this shape. It's comfortable, it's clean, and yeah, it's a budget man's gentleman's folder, sort of. Does that exist? Does it? You tell me. What do you think? Anyway. Oh, the only other thing I wish they would have changed, like I said before, is I wish they would have made this cutout a little bit bigger so it'd be a little bit easier to get in to release that liner lock. There you go. What do you think? Leave your comments down below. Hopefully you like, share, and comment on the video. And if you've not yet subscribed, please do that. And again, thank you to my financial supporters. I appreciate your help every month. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.